All right, welcome to another Job Board Secrets interview session where we talk to job board industry professionals. I'm your host, Chris Russell. Today I'm joined by Steven Rothberg of the popular entry-level job board, collegerecruiter.com. Steven, it's good to see you again. How are you?
Good, Chris. Good to see you too. Be
Good.
better if we were seeing each other in person at some conference someplace, but
That would be nice. Yes, that would be nice. Perhaps next year. I don't think this year's in the cards, but
yeah.
so, Stephen, give the viewers a short history of your business. You've been around for a while. I'm curious when it started and kind of set the scene for where you guys are today.
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, so College Recruiter is a job search site for students and recent graduates of colleges and universities in the US and Canada. So they come to our site to find part-time, seasonal, internship, and entry-level jobs, basically jobs that require 0 to 3 years of experience. The business has morphed a few times over the years. I started it about 3 decades ago. And the early origins
3 decades ago?
Yeah, so the early origin of it was in 1988, when probably some of your listeners weren't even alive. But in 1988, I was a college senior in my hometown of Winnipeg, Canada. And I went to my undergraduate university and offered to print their campus map for them for free if they would handle the distribution and allow me to sell the advertising around the edges. And they said yes. It was really fun, made a lot of money that summer, and then basically pretty much gave away the business to a couple of friends of mine. And I moved to Minneapolis, where I live now, for grad school, and as I like to joke, for the weather. Went to law school, graduated a few years later, and I was out working in my first year and sort of got sucked back into it. I had always intended to practice law for maybe 4, 5, 6 years, then get back into small business. That's where my first love was. I think you probably get that as a diehard entrepreneur. And so I started the business, started back up the business, but this time in Minneapolis, part-time, while I was also working full-time as a lawyer. And then went to the business full-time in the fall of 91. And the fall of 91. And then several years later, rather than just doing campus maps, started to also publish an employment magazine called College Recruiter. And that was initially distributed through college career service offices. There were eventually 4 different regionalized versions. About 250 schools around the country were distributing it. And then one of the career service office directors in 1995 said to me that there's this thing called the internet. And she didn't know what it was. She'd never been on it, or so she thought, but she knew that some of her students were using it to find jobs. And for context, of the Fortune 500 in 1995, 50 of them had websites. Only 5 of those had career sections, and none of them had searchable job databases like an ATS or anything like that. It would just typically be a page that said, we hire these sorts of people, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, fax your resume here. So we, as best as we can tell, we were one of the first 200 job boards to go live, at least according to Yahoo. In that era, the way you got listed on Yahoo was there was a toll-free number on the bottom of their homepage. Our developer picked up the phone with me standing over his shoulder. He called them, a human being answered, and then a human being told us to hit reload on our Netscape Navigator 3.0 browser, and there you were. About a week later, I got a phone call from a guy in Texas who said, hey, I have this financial services company, and I saw your website. How do I buy a job posting ad on it? And we're like, I don't know. So we kind of figured something out. The guy bought an ad, he hired a couple people, and we realized maybe there's a business here. So the business has definitely grown quite a bit since then.
Definitely. Nice. So, kind of give us a sense of where you are today as far as the business goes. Um, you've seen a lot of changes over those 3 decades, obviously, and you stuck around too, which is testament to your success and your ability to stay in business. But give us a sense of how big you are today.
Yeah, sure. So until the last couple of months, what we were seeing from Google Analytics and telling our prospective customers, mostly Fortune 1000 and government agency customers, is that we had about 2.5 million user sessions a year. So we helped about 2.5 million people a year find employment, which is a pretty cool thing. The last couple of months, our traffic has basically doubled. It's not a long enough period of time yet where we're starting to change that 2.5 million number. I want to see at least 4, 5, 6 months of that level of traffic so that we know that this isn't a blip.
Yeah.
To go to most of our customers and say to them, we have 2.5 million people a year using our site, that kind of allows them to check the box. Yep, they've got enough traffic. If we go to them and say 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, whatever the number may end up being, and then it comes back down again. If it's just like a blip and then it comes back out down, I don't want to have to go to an employer and say, yeah, I know 3 weeks ago when I sent you a proposal, I said 5 million, but it's actually more like 3. We want to make sure that this is sustainable, that this level of traffic that we've been seeing the last couple of months is really permanent and not just a blip for a couple of months.
Yeah. How big's your team, Stephen? Is it kind of a lean startup
With
approach?
Yeah, so with W-2 and 1099 type contractors, we've got about a dozen people at any given time.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, and you mentioned traffic is up, but how about business? Is
Yeah.
obviously a lot of job boards took a hit over COVID-19, but you maybe seeing a comeback, I guess.
Yeah, so we were definitely one of the job boards that felt that kind of maybe around March 10th, 12th kind of timing, when most people realized that this thing called COVID is serious. Businesses were starting to shut down, send people home, and there was just tremendous uncertainty in the market. I mean, people were trying to figure out, how do I get high speed internet in my house, and enough that my kids can be on Zoom with their teachers and I can be on Zoom with my boss, and maybe I can upload files. I mean, just the home computing power that a lot of office workers had was just not sufficient. People didn't have a place to work. They would set up a desk in their bedroom or in the living room, and kids were running by. I mean, it was just chaotic for a lot of people for a couple of weeks. Compounding that, there were massive layoffs. So you didn't know from day to day who your team members were. That all started to settle down by the beginning of April. What we saw in terms of traffic was about a 25% decline, in terms of business revenues, about a 25% decline in March as compared to the previous couple of months. And March would normally be up for us. January, February, March would be up. April would usually be kind of flat for us. And then we'd have a slower May, slower June, slower July, and then it would start to come back up again. We have a bit of seasonality.
Yep.
Instead, what happened was January, February were pretty similar to what we would have expected to see historically. March was down maybe 25%. And I think a lot of it was simply that the vast majority of employers didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they didn't know, is our business is going to be open, closed? Are we working from home? Are we not? Is Sally still my boss? Is she fired or furloughed? I mean, just people didn't know what was going on. So nobody was making decisions. Yep. April started to roll around when the world started to settle down into this new normal, and business started to pick up again. And then May, our business was about double. So our revenues now, for like in May, we're significantly higher than what we saw in January and February,
Yep.
and I think a lot of that it's a combination of our products, which we can talk about if you want, and also just who our customers are, which we can kind of talk about that in general too, if you want.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say if you had to kind of push out to the full year here? Will your revenues be a little bit less than last year? Do you think?
Yeah.
What is the
So
number? 10%, maybe 20%?
right now we do annual, quarterly, and weekly planning. We use this the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS. Some people call it Traction for short system. And for those of your listeners who have small businesses, if you're a solo person, it's kind of silly, because holding yourself accountable and setting those sorts of goals, what did you do last week? What were you supposed to do last week? It's kind of silly if you're one person. But even if you're a team of like 3, 4, 5, or like us, roughly a dozen, or if you're 50, it's really great. And I would definitely suggest people look at it. So we did our annual planning at the beginning of January, and we set a number of different, what they call rocks, goals. One of them was revenue. And we still feel like we're on track for that. With the way that revenues were in the last half of April into May, and certainly so far into June, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of months we felt like we were actually ahead of schedule. And again, I think it's a function of the marketplace for job boards we think is changing faster because of COVID. The disruption is accelerating some of the changes that we were expecting to see over a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit difficult for me, because I don't want to think this way. I certainly don't want to talk this way in terms of like, oh, this has been a good thing for us. But I also want to be realistic, and there are some businesses that have been hurt more or less by this. We've been hurt less. I feel fortunate about that. But some other disaster, or man-made, natural, it could have been the other way too.
Sure, definitely. What are your clients saying about the state of college recruiting right now? I'm hearing a lot of stories about internships being canceled, postponed, we're going virtual. Have you talked to any of your clients about what they're doing?
Oh yeah. So when we realized how significant the problem was going to be, not just from a health perspective, but from what our employer is going to do about their students that they've hired, like juniors who are going into their senior year. That's typically a summer where they would do an internship or two. What are they going to do for the graduates that would be going into entry-level jobs? Are those employers laying people off? Are they going to adapt this hiring program to a new reality? Are they rescinding offers? We immediately, within probably 4 or 5 days, I think it was around March 12th, maybe March 15th, we just stopped all of the marketing efforts that we had been doing, which were fine. I mean, there was nothing wrong with them if it hadn't been for COVID. But it would have been incredibly tone deaf in a COVID world, like emailing out articles through a marketing automation system that would have said, hey, Chris, if you want to know what the starting salaries are for chemical engineers, go read this article. Well, if you're a recruiter, a talent acquisition manager, and you're not really sure if your laptop at home turns on or not, or who is still employed by your company, you're not all that interested in starting salaries. We really felt like we needed to adapt our content. So we immediately started to publish a ton of short videos. I think we've got a couple dozen. We did some webcasts with thousands of talent acquisition leaders participating in them. We published a lot of blog articles. I mean, we probably have 50 or so pieces of content directly related to COVID. Our marketing program now is around COVID, how to adapt your internship program. If you're going to be delaying start dates, what should you do? How do you do a video interview, both on the job seeker side and on the employer side? What we're hearing from our employers is really mixed. Without naming names, it wouldn't be fair to them. One of the country's largest charter school companies signed up with us at the beginning of March for a fairly significant campaign. Probably would have been about $10,000 when all was said and done, to help them hire teachers. And within a week, they paused the campaign because their schools were all closed indefinitely. I mean, it was just like, it's hard to remember just a few months ago how quickly that all came on. And yesterday they reached out and said, we want to restart. Our schools are going to be opening. We don't really know how they're going to be reopening, but we do know we need to hire teachers again. And so they're starting to advertise for teachers. The largest employers, the Fortune 500s, the government agencies, most of them didn't really change their hiring at all. What they, in terms of the numbers they were hiring or the people they were hiring, there were very few rescinded offers. But what we did see were a lot of adapted programs. Rather than that intern working in your office for 12 weeks, they might have been working from home for 4. Some of the biggest employers in the country, KPMG and PwC, some of the biggest employers of students, instead of bringing on 10 to 15,000 students for internships, instead what they did is they gave them 2-week virtual internships, paid them for the summer, and gave an offer for permanent employment, upon graduation next spring. So if you lined up an internship with PwC or KPMG months ago, I think in April, they came to you and said, hey, bad news, you're not going to go to our Kansas City office for this great experience, but you're going to have a bit of an experience this summer. And as long as you're willing, you're going to come work for us upon graduation. I mean, that was just awesome.
Yep.
We saw definitely slow down in hiring. If an employer might have taken, say, 20 to 30 days to go from the point where you applied until they extended an offer, it might have been 40 to 60 days. It just, everything took longer.
Yep. Cool. Let's shift gears a bit and talk more about your business and some of the tech there. First of all, break down your products for me from a job board perspective. What do you sell to employers? Can you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, no sweat. Small employers, what we direct them to is a $75 30-day job posting ad. It's typically, for a typical employer, we're going to be sending 20 to 30 candidates to their website, or if we host the applications. That's significantly more than the average job board. eQuest and AppCast published a study of studies a couple years ago, was like an average of 1 application per job posting. So for small employers, if they're just looking to hire 1 person here, 1 person there, $75 for 30 days for a job post. Job postings for larger employers, or at least those that are hiring dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands, we have a product called Jobs That Scale. It's basically a pay-per-click version of the job posting. Looks exactly the same as the others. It's in the same search. To the candidate, they can't tell a difference. But what we do is, if you're looking to hire 10 people and I'm looking to hire 50 people and our postings are identical, I'll pay a higher cost per click because I want to hire more people. Those candidates are worth more to me than they are to you, simply because you don't need as many of them. So our site will automatically rank that job with the higher cost per click higher in the search results, which then exponentially increases the number of applicants. So we'll have employers like, think, e-commerce company with a warehouse, they need to hire 200 people within 2 weeks. They might, to do that, they probably need 4,000 applications. Then they might need 40,000 people going to their website. I mean, the numbers become staggering. They might work with us and 5 other sites, and we'll run one job posting, and in a couple of weeks, we'll drive 10,000 people to their site. And again, it's because it's cost per click. The more they pay per click, the more candidates they get. So that's our big growth product. A product that we're pretty well known for are targeted email campaigns. We have the ability, permission to email about 20 million students and recent grads. And we can do it by select by school, geography, major, year of graduation, diversity, etc. So we'll do email campaigns for an accounting company where we're emailing all of the female African-American, Native American, military veterans, people with disabilities who are accounting and finance majors in these 12 cities or at these 48 schools. So that's another big product. What we used to sell a lot more of, and we rarely do now, are banner ads, either mobile or display. Maybe 5 years ago, we might have sold a campaign every couple of weeks, and now we maybe sell a couple a year. I just don't think with programmatic job advertising that banner advertising makes any sense for employers anymore.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the email stuff. Any thoughts about moving that to texting at some point?
We did some texting early on, like 08, 09, and deliberately got out of the business.
Why is that?
It's attractive. The way that Next does it, I think is really smart, and they do a really good job. But if you're not dotting every I and crossing every T, the liability is massive. So just because somebody told you that go ahead and text me, if I pick up my phone and text you, no problem. But if I load 1,000 numbers into some kind of automated system and text those people, I have a major problem. If they didn't give me exactly the right permissions, if I don't have exactly the right paperwork, then every single text that I send, the fine is $500 to $1,500. So there have been cases like Simon & Schuster where the civil liability was $90 million or something like that, because their vendor didn't have the right documentation. It's a real problem. It's the same, texting people without the proper permissions or without the proper documentation is often the issue. Opens up massive liability for everybody up and down the food chain. Another problem that I see with texting is, pretty much by definition, you get the text on your mobile phone. If that text is coming from an employer that uses an applicant tracking system, it's really unlikely that you're going to apply to that job. You're going to get the text, you're going to open it, you're going to click on the link, you're going to go to the employer's site, you're going to read that job posting, and then you're going to do nothing. And most of the employers that we work with, they're looking at the effective cost per application as their metric for success. So somebody's on a phone and they don't apply to the job, that looks pretty bad.
Interesting. Now, I've been thinking about texting and job boards and recruiting lately, and I've always felt that if I was starting a new job board today, and I would kind of build a texting first, feature into it, essentially, where job seeker could opt in, obviously, and get alerts according to their specificity, and just make things faster that way. I don't know. What do you think about it?
If your customers are small employers, yeah. If your customers are gig economy employers or other employers that have a very, very minimalist application process, great. If you've got an employer who has, like what Jobs to Web used to have, it's now SuccessFactors RMK. So you go to the ATS and there's basically a page that says sign up for our talent community and just enter your name and email address. Well, you can do that on your mobile. That's no issue. But if you then have to go to, name your ATS of choice, if you have to go to an iCIMS page, and nothing wrong with iCIMS, they're one of the better ATS. But if you have to upload a resume, tell me how many people can do that on their phone.
And nobody.
It just doesn't happen. I think texting is fantastic for branding, right? So if your employer's goal, if their campaign is to build awareness, if you're having a career fair, an open house, and you want to tell people, hey, we're Burger King and we're opening a new restaurant in 2 weeks and we're hiring people today, come to our open house tomorrow from 9 to 6. Texting is an amazing solution for that. But if you're a big defense contractor and you need somebody to go through 14 pages of an application and take an online assessment, good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I worry about email though. My daughter's 17. She never checks email.
Yeah.
And so, she's going to be forced to at some point, I think, but I wonder how this new crop of kids is going to look at email versus texting.
Yeah. Well, I have 3. They kind of straddle the millennial Gen Z. So, your daughter's definitely in that Gen Z group. My youngest it would be kind of like that too. She just turned 21. Before she went to college, email was as painful as cleaning her room. But now she's checking email multiple times a day because that's how her professors are communicating with her.
So
that's
there is
how
hope.
She gets her grades. That's how she gets her assignments. So, if your daughter's going to college, you can look forward to her actually really learning how to use email. She still may not like it, but she's going to use it.
All right, there's hope, I guess. All right. Cool. Well, this is maybe right, Steven. I noticed I was on your site before. I like the commute times on your job listings. Talk about that.
Yeah. So we license the search technology from Google. Google Cloud is the division. They call it Cloud Talent Solutions. And so the database is ours, the job postings, that's ours. And the way it works is that we upload to Google Cloud Talent Solutions the job data. And then when a candidate searches, we send that search query to Google Cloud, to the Cloud Talent Solutions, and it basically matches up the candidate's query and other attributes with the job data. One of the really neat things that it does is it's not just the query, it's also the candidate's search history. So if they've come to our site before and run other searches, Google essentially remembers the jobs that they're looking at and other queries that they've run. So if they type in server, Google will know, are they a computer hardware person or are they a restaurant person? And then they'll automatically return their relevant search results. If there's a misspelling or acronyms, they'll look for synonyms for words. One of the features that they rolled out, I think it was maybe 2 years ago now, was this commute search. And when they announced it, we got a little bit of a heads up on it. It was one of those things that's like, that is so brilliant. How come nobody did this before?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, why isn't Indeed doing it? I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of Indeed, I mean, I think they're kind of almost in your backyard, right? I mean, yeah. you live right near them in Connecticut, right?
Yes. Okay.
I
knew Indeed when they were like 10 people.
Okay, yeah, and me too. So, and I went to their office in Stamford. I don't know if they're in the same office or whatever.
No,
but
different ones,
but geographically speaking, for your listeners who don't know that area, you're basically almost on the Atlantic Ocean, and you go across this little bay, and there's Long Island.
Yes, and you can't get there from Connecticut.
Right, but you can't get there from Connecticut. It's what, 3 miles across the water or something like that. It's not far. No. So if you're on a typical job board and you run a search and you say, show me every job within 10 miles, typical area of the country, that's going to be maybe a 20-minute commute. Well, where you are, that's an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah. Because
you have to drive all the way south through New York City, and then you basically have to do this big U. So what Google did is it took its mapping software and it said, okay, well, wait a second. How long does it take to get from point A to point B? Who cares if it's 5 miles? Nobody really cares if they work 5 miles from where they live or 2 miles or 20 miles. What they care about is how long does it take to get there. Also, from where I am in Minneapolis, if I want to jump on a bus and get to downtown Minneapolis, it's 20 minutes. If I want to get to the Mall of America, which is half as far, it's about an hour and a half, because just there's not a bus that runs from where I live to the Mall of America. So I'd have to go downtown and then take another bus and it's like this big V. And that's how public transportation is set up in almost all metro areas in the country. It's like a hub and spoke. And so if you want to go from one suburb to another, it might only be 2 miles, but it might take you 2 hours. So Google said people care about not the physical distance, but they care about the time distance. Like, how long does it take you, not how far is it? And so that's what the commute search does. When we prioritize jobs on our site, when we rank them, it doesn't matter if it's 5 miles or 10 miles or a mile. The factor that we're looking at is the commute time. And the candidate can change from walking to cycling to public transportation to driving. And they can say, show me every job within 30 minutes by bicycle. And then we'll only show those jobs. And there's a map with pins on it, so you can see where the different jobs are, just like on Google Maps. And you can click on the pin, and then you see, oh, XYZ Corporation is hiring a registered nurse. It kind of has a little bit of summary information, and then you can go right to that job listing on our site. It's light years ahead of what a traditional job board offers, and we didn't do anything. It just showed up one day.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So last question for you, Steven. You must get hit up all the time for people looking to start their own job boards and asking for advice. What do you tell them these days?
Well, you'll sort of like this. So what I do when I get those queries, I tell them 2 things. One is, and this is a little bit of the Minnesota nice, which really means passive aggressive. What I tell them is, it sounds to me like you're asking for consulting services. And then I quote them an exorbitant hourly rate for consulting.
You're supposed to send them to me, Steven.
And so I'll usually say, depending upon their email and how they got to me and whatever, I'll usually say somewhere between $250 and $400 an hour. Now, to be clear, nobody has ever paid that, and I'm not worth that. But I figured, you know what, if somebody's stupid enough to pay me $400 an hour to do some consulting work on their new job board, fine, then it's worth my time. And then what I do when I'm being a little, the next paragraph or whatever, is I'll usually give them a recommendation for who to contact. You're always on that list. I'll usually put 2 or 3 people onto that list. And one of the reasons I don't put, like, say, just you onto that list is that I don't want that person to sort of come back to me and have me be responsible. Like, let them, I can narrow the list, and then they should compare and contrast who the different people are. Like, you obviously have a few competitors, right? You're going to be better for certain job board owners, not others. Like, I don't know this, but you may not know anything about the job board industry in Southeast Asia, right? So if somebody wants to start a job board in Southeast Asia, you would know a lot about starting a job board, but not the geographic nuances. Now, maybe you would bring in someone who has that expertise, or maybe you would just say, I'm not your guy, and you'd refer them over to somebody else. So I do, I probably get contacted once a week by somebody who's just usually pretty clearly not serious. It's just kind of a whim, but probably once a month, there's somebody who's really, really serious. I do think it's a really good industry to get into, as long as you've got, sort of your realism hat on. You can't just throw up crappy software and have checks coming through the door. It's highly competitive.
Yeah, you got to. I tell them, if there's one skill you have to learn, it's internet marketing.
Yeah.
Because without that, you're not going to make any noise. You're not going to get any traffic. You're not going to make any sales.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's a marketing game.
Yeah, and as you know, this is one of those industries that's even more complicated than a typical. If you're a retailer, you're in a single-sided marketplace, right? You've got people coming into your shop to buy blouses, and that's your customer. In our industry, it's a double-sided marketplace. You've got to take care of your candidates, and you got to take care of your employers, and you've got to balance their interests. And that's something that when I hear these companies coming in, it's like, we've never been in the job board industry. We don't know anything about HR or HR tech, and we think that's an advantage. And we're going to revolutionize the way the job board industry is known. I make a mental note to see what they're doing a year from then, and they're always gone. The only exception to that is ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter came in like that, and they were really smart, and they had good money behind them because of the successes that they had, and they did. Really helped to revolutionize the industry, and we're all better off because of them.
Nice. Well, Steven Rothberg from collegerecruiter.com will end on that note. Appreciate your time today, Steven, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Chris.
All right.